Namaste and welcome. I am Pratim Ranjan Bose and you are listening to my podcast Perspective. In this episode, I will discuss the forthcoming union budget and the tough choices before the government. The full budget for the fiscal year 2024-25 will be placed in the Parliament on July 23. A budget is an accounting statement of little relevance in a liberalized economy, where policy making is market-oriented and dynamic. However, this year's budget is important. The less than expected numbers for BJP in the 2024 general election might force Narendra Modi government to step up populist measures, sugar-coated as social spending. What remains to be seen is how the government manages to do that without compromising fiscal prudence and ensuring greater flow of money in critical areas like infrastructure building or widening the scope of production-linked incentive or PLI scheme. That will fuel growth and increase private sector capital expenditure. A lot is spoken about jobs in recent years. There has been a flurry of newspaper columns and commentaries by economists citing inadequate job creation vis-a-vis India's increasing population. Unfortunately, the majority of these commentaries are either overtly political or hiding some unsavory truths to be politically correct. The Indian growth story has been jobless for the last 2 decades. The phrase jobless growth was born during the short-lived boom between 2004 and 2009. There are many reasons behind inadequate job creation. The most critical of them is the population growth. China opened up its economy in 1978 after the successful implementation of the one-child policy. Between 1978 and 2008, when China was growing in double digits, her population growth rate declined from 1.3% to 0.5%. Indian population was growing at 2.1% annually in 1991 when the economy was liberalized. It reached 1.3% in 2013, at the same level as China in 1978. India's population is now growing at 0.8% vis-a-vis minus 0.1% in China. It means while China was creating new jobs at an exponential rate, the average annual addition to the workforce was also declining. Naturally, unemployment declined dramatically. Secondly, till 2009-10, China offered little social security in villages. Beijing regulated rural-urban migration and took full advantage of cheap labor in the early stages of its emergence as the factory of the world. The model was infamously referred to as Barbie doll economics. India's next-door neighbor, Bangladesh, also took advantage of cheap labor to become the second largest garment exporter of the world. Chinese labor is no longer cheap. From lower-end production, the country moved to high-technology areas. But India fell in between, courtesy of a competitive democracy where political parties are eager to offer doles for votes. China stepped up social spending after decades of high growth and sustained investment in industry and infrastructure. Good quality infrastructure discounted the rise in wage costs and kept the overall production cost low. India started infra building in 2001 during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's rule. 5 years later, the Congress-led UPA went on a spree to enhance subsidies and social spending, ignoring infra creation. Some of the measures like midday meal for school-going children by UPA government were good, but many social securities created the wrong precedents for the economy. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005 MNREGS was surely a bad choice at the wrong time. The $7 billion scheme is not market linked. People are supposed to get a minimum of 100 days work, mostly related to public works in their villages. Such a huge amount of work cannot be created at the village level, that too for 20 long years. Across India, local politicians and villagers treat it as easy money. Whatever work is left is done by machines at a fraction of the cost. Like it or not, MNREGS has become a major source of corruption. More importantly, it is eating away precious resources which could have been better used in creating right infrastructure and market linkage for rural, farm and non-farm activities. That India has been witnessing regular pinches of vegetable price inflation for nearly 1.5 decades is partly due to climate and largely due to lack of infrastructure. Vegetables suffer from low shelf life due to the absence of suitable logistics for long distance transport. Vegetable farming takes place in the vicinity of the cities. Travel around the vast hinterlands of eastern UP, which is 800 kilometers from Delhi, and you will see farmers are mostly into cereals, which have a long shelf life. Vegetable is a top choice of the farmers in the suburbs of Kolkata. All these are finally linked to job creation. Unless the basics are corrected, doles may push up consumption aspirations but not income. India will remain a consumption-led growth story. China and Vietnam will walk away with the cream. Modi tried to set things right in his first 2 terms. The food subsidy bill was cut despite increasing the coverage of the free food grain scheme to nearly 80% of people. He did not touch the MNREGS but enhanced monitoring, thereby causing heartburn in states like West Bengal, which created a huge political economy of freebies. The leash on subsidies helped the government to take infrastructure creation to historic peak. The transport infrastructure from roads and rails to civil aviation has visibly changed for the better. The number of airports has doubled, expressways are crisscrossing the country, even the long neglected inland water transport got a boost. This, coupled with digital infrastructure and tax reforms, improved the ease of doing business dramatically, as is visible in the startup and e-commerce revolution. The PLI scheme is working too well in electronics, semiconductors, etc. From smartphones to military hardware, we now have more star performers in the export basket apart from the age-old IT and pharmaceuticals. Apple is shifting its smartphone production from China to India at a record pace. Over the last year, the company's India sales increased by 33% to $8 billion. Globally, 14 to 15% of iPhones are now sourced from India. The sourcing ratio may double in the next few years. Apple is not alone. Taiwanese companies are shifting production from China to India in a hurry. Singapore-based Temasek Holding is on course to shift $10 billion of market investment from China to India over the next 3 years. The most important of all, in a recent disclosure, India's central bank said that average capacity utilization of the country's corporate sector had touched 74%. Motilal Oswal Financial Securities claims that capital expenditures in the private sector have begun to increase. Indian corporates have been struggling with unutilized capacities since the burst of the 2004-2009 boom. Capital expenditure suffered for more than a decade. Things have just started looking good. To make it a long-term affair, the country now has to step up spending in the right areas. Will Modi do that in his 3rd term, or will he fall into the grip of the same reverie politics that he once criticized? Thank you for listening to Perspective. If you like this episode, please share and subscribe. See you next week. फिर मिलेंगे.